So gardening tricks to actually get yourself started. All of us have a different amount of space available to us, but there's always something that you can do. Now there are a couple of tricks that you can use. There's plenty of plants that will very happily grow inside pots. So playing around, getting the correct pot and the right sizes and spacing in plants that you're actually going to eat is first step. The other thing is obviously potting mix can be quite expensive if you're actually getting a lot of it. Now, if you have a landscaping area not too far away from you, and a lot of us will actually have that opportunity, have a look into it, because getting a hold of their potting mixes and garden mixes is a way cheaper way of doing it. You can get a pile like this for around $60 odd. You know, that would cost, what, maybe $1,000 worth of potting mix or something ridiculous like that, and I'm probably over exaggerating. However, there's a massive difference in price. So if you can do that, it's a brilliant way to fill up a whole heap of pots and a much lower price point. Throw a little bit of fertilizer, compost, whatever. Most of them have compost in them. So it's a great way to get yourself started. If you have your own property, do some raised garden beds, make some garden beds up. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. And if you're renting, find the right pots. Or if you happen to be there long enough and your landlord is open to it, make some raised garden beds. Great amount of experimenting that you can do, and it's good for you. It's better for your health as well as your mental health. And man, there's nothing like the experience of actually growing your own plants and food. You know, it's a satisfying experience. Start recording. So here's an example of a little raised garden bed that I'm getting set up. My landlord is open to this. He's very happy with the idea. I've got a bit of scrap and rubbish in there which I'll have to clean up, but lay down some cardboard first to kill off and prevent the grass from coming through. The cardboard's going to break down anyway, and there's one there that I've already filled up. So, you know, there's a lot you can do with that. Now I do have the disadvantage of I am renting and I work in a job that could be moving potentially at any stage, but I've also been given an indication that there's a reasonable chance that I'll be here for a year or more. So I figured this is something I want to do, and look, what's the worst that's going to happen? I get some food that I grow myself, get some experience, get to play around, and I'll also get an idea of what produces well, and I can actually put in pots for when I do move. So basically this is from one of those landscaping places, and what I'm essentially doing is, this is one I've put some stuff in already. So I've just thrown a couple of bits of wood in there. Don't want to put too much because this isn't a very deep one, so I'll cause too much trouble with the root structure if I go too far with that. And then basically I'll probably throw a little bit of mulch in, some compost, something to basically sort of improve the soil a little bit extra, give it a bit more aeration, fill that all up. This one that I showed you before doesn't have any wood in there, but that's fine. I'll just throw a little bit extra sort of mulch in there to underneath to just give that a little bit better. Here's an example of one I got started on a few weeks ago. Just putting some random items in there. As you can see, it's a little on the cluttered side. I'm not exactly the world's best at spacing, but I'm going to figure that one out along the way. Here I've got most of my climbing stuff, so something for them to climb on. And the pumpkins there, I was actually really surprised, as one day there was absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden they were there, and that's carrots next to them, celery. So I'm going to plan out these other three over here a little bit better, so that, you know, I'm going to try to do the correct thing with like what prefers more nitrogen, different types of plants, and just, yeah, it's not going to be perfect because I'm not really good at that anyway. But I'm just going to try and structure it just a little bit neater. And our pots. So this one here. Now, a little unrealized element with the majority of vegetables is 20 to 30 centimeters is the general root depth. So a lot of them will actually quite happily grow in a pot. The trick is, of course, spacing and getting the maximum amount out of it without overcrowding, which is one of the mistakes I know I regularly make. So in here I've got like a heap of radishes, got some carrots, one of these is a zucchini, and the other is a squash. I've got a label here somewhere and I've lost where it is, but basically if you've got limited space, something like this pot would actually work quite nicely. Then you've also got your large round pots where you can put your main plant like capsicum or a tomato, and then some smaller ones around it like maybe some herbs or a radish. Things that tend to grow nice and quickly and don't actually need a huge amount of space. So there's a lot you can play around with. It's like if you've got a balcony, a driveway, whatever, you can actually still grow a reasonable amount in it. Yeah, so I will be experimenting and giving you some ideas along the way with this. And here's just an example of what you can get out of a pot. So that's a radish, just pulled it out, that's a few weeks. Here's another little trick I'm playing around with as well. Once again, one of these is a zucchini and the other is a squash. I'm not certain which. I've got a few strawberries going, some variations on thyme. Thyme is a plant until recently that I have had a lot of difficulty with. I somehow have managed to kill one of the most hardy of all of the herbs out there, but I think I've finally nailed it. They do seem to like these hanging baskets. Whether or not the squash and the zucchini actually stick with it or not is going to be another matter. I'm not sure whether there's enough root space in there, but with fertilizing and plenty of watering, I reckon I can make that work. So there's a lot you can actually make work and play around with regardless of space. So first step obviously is going to be spade, pile of dirt, fill it up. This is the part of gardening that I'm not as big a fan of because it's actually the physical work, but it's good exercise. So the first step that I do generally myself like to do is get that bottom layer properly covered and put something, you know, put it down. And then if you are going to put down some mulch or compost in there, you basically put that in around nowish, except for the mulch that you actually put on top, which I'm probably not going to do until the plants are at least past seedling stage. All right, you want to basically, that cardboard, you want to get that properly covered so that you know everything's in there nice and neat. So that's a good example there. So I've got a couple of different mulches here. I'm not sponsored by any of these, nowhere near big enough for that yet. But sugarcane mulch, which one would normally use in situations like, well, it usually goes on the top, but I'm going to throw a little bit in here to help with aeration. And also this one, which I recently discovered, I've decided I actually quite like it, largely because it smells like what I think it should smell like. It's got a real organic smell to it, and it's got microbes and biology actually in there, so it'll actually help to improve the soil to get a good kickstart. So I believe this also is supposed to really go on top, but I'm going to throw a bit in there as well, once again to assist with the aeration and the health of the overall soil, to give it a bit of a kickstart. Another little trick to be aware of as well is organic versus not. Now, a lot of labels will use the word organic, which isn't necessarily inaccurate, but it can be misleading. So if you're actually after organic, there's actually a symbol for it. You'll basically see, you know, organic registered product. So it's an actual registration they have to go through. This one's got an input for organic garden. So essentially that, I'm pretty certain, means that they're in the process and probably almost there. So I'm not super duper on the whole organic versus not, but where you can, I generally would say go for it, because chemicals versus organic the organic version is much better for your soil. The microbes, the good things like your worms and so on and so forth, will actually get a lot more out of it than when you're putting the chemicals in, which will actually harm a lot of the microbes. So you actually go backwards. So try to keep it as natural as you can. If you have if you actually have compost going, fantastic. I don't have that going at the moment, but definitely something to keep in mind. Now, keeping in mind, another note for organic is basically anything that grows essentially is organic. The organic certification basically is a lack of chemicals. So it can be organic sugarcane mulch, for example, but it has been grown with chemicals. Those chemicals will thereby become part of the whole process. So that's why there's a difference in that certification. Is it necessarily a bad thing? Not necessarily, but one is technically better than the other. So as I said, always try to go for the organic where you can, but you know, availability and budget's always going to play a part. You know, if it's a little bit more, spend a little bit more. If it's like hugely more, then maybe not. Your own compost is always a better way to go. So there we have it. So you want to try to level it out best you can within reason. Don't get overly pedantic, but my next step from here is to give it a good watering in. That'll help it level out a little more, top it up if necessary, and then go for the planting. So there you have it. Garden beds are all set up. Stay tuned. I'm going to keep you updated as I basically work out what to plant, where I plant it, and various ways of planting, and then we can keep you updated as we go along the way. So hopefully this has given you some tips and understandings of just how easy it can be and what you can do. Yeah, get out there, do some gardening, plant it in pots if you need to. See if you can find a landscaping place, get that mix a lot cheaper.